Welcome to this Talks at Google virtual event. I'm Jana Suarez, and I'm on the marketing team at Google. I'm very excited to introduce today's guest, Annie Eaton. Annie Eaton is an immersive content producer specializing in engaging and interactive virtual reality and augmented reality experiences. She is the founder and CEO of Futurus, which provides training and product visualization applications and provides technology consulting for various enterprise organizations and nonprofits. She is here with us today to discuss her book, The Extended Reality Blueprint, where she delves into the discovery and product development process through an immersive technology lens. Annie Eaton, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Talks at Google.
Thank you, Jana. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you. So you mentioned that in your book, your interest in extended reality came almost out of the blue. I'd love to learn a little bit more about your path and how you got here.
You are correct. It did seemingly come out of the blue. I really feel like it was a right time, right place situation, and then followed by a lot of hard work. But when I was first introduced to virtual reality, it was by a coworker at a previous company. He just had a headset for fun, for his own personal enthusiasm for the technology, and was bringing it around, showing all of the coworkers what it could do. And I will admit, because it was a very early VR headset, it was actually the DK1 from Oculus's Kickstarter, if anyone remembers that. It didn't have something called positional tracking, so it was a little nauseating at the time. Of course, we've come a long way from then, but it was a transformative moment for me. It was a spark of inspiration on what could be and how this technology could be applied. And while I had a marketing background, I was in marketing roles prior to starting my business. I saw a lot of opportunities outside of gaming and got kind of obsessed. So, in addition to that one moment, I also worked with that coworker to create a community organization on Meetup. Found a lot of common ground with others in my city. I'm from Atlanta, and that community grew from a couple hundred people at the beginning now to thousands. So it was both being inspired by the technology, but also finding inspiration from the community around me and the opportunities that presented themselves in all of these different events that we were hosting.
That's awesome. I love that you have a marketing background. I'm currently a marketer, but my background
Nice.
before that was in the sciences. So I'm actually really curious, what inspired you to delve further into the world of extended reality as a non-developer? And how did you maybe translate some of your skill sets to marketing to really make the impact in the various projects that you've taken on?
Well, I do think marketing is a great way to get into extended reality production. So, because as marketers, we're already thinking about new ways to educate audiences, educate customers on what our products or services can do, we're always looking for something that can achieve that. So, I feel like that was a benefit for me. I know virtual reality and augmented reality really do take in both the creative and the technology. So if you have a mind that can work in that way, the combination of those two really bring together these experiences. And I think I mentioned a moment ago, non-gaming applications. I didn't grow up playing many video games. I grew up with the arts. So video games were not the first thing that I thought of. And while the company I was working at the time, I tried to pitch VR internally and they weren't really having it. There were other opportunities that came out of that meetup group. So by putting myself out there and organizing these events, different companies around the Atlanta area and beyond started looking at me saying, oh, she knows what she's talking about. Really, I was just good at organizing people and facilitating conversations and giving technology demos, all of which was important at the time. I didn't have to have a super deep understanding of the tech. This was back in 2014. But I worked with people who were subject matter experts in the field or who did have the knowledge that I didn't, to both learn from them and incorporate them on these early opportunities. And so while people weren't necessarily ready for full on development, they were ready for consulting engagements, helping them define use cases and prototyping. And so that's where I started. I leveraged these opportunities that were coming to me through these events and my name being associated with it into actually selling consulting and services and development work that I then managed the staffing of. So it did have kind of an odd start. I wasn't really anticipating starting a company when I was introduced to virtual reality. It happened. I saw the opportunities. I said, "Hey, I could do this." And I think something I've told people is that the fact that I'm not a developer is one of the reasons I think my company has succeeded. I find a lot of times when you're the one creating the product and doing all of the technical aspects, you lose sight of the necessary business functions that are required to build and sustain a business. And so, because I'm not a developer, I actually think that's an advantage for our company. I was able to focus on growth and organizing and managing and finding customers rather than getting stuck. Too deep in the work. So it was a good balance for me and for our team, and have been able to grow it from there.
That's awesome to hear. And I mean, I agree with you. I think having the broader skill sets and background and sometimes not knowing everything makes you ask the right questions to really get to
Yes.
those answers. So I feel like what you've explained, I mean, maybe looking back, it's easier to connect the dots and see how it all makes sense. But in the moment, you're probably just trying to figure it out. And that made you a lot more open to be able to like react in the moment. So that's really awesome to
Absolutely.
hear.
Thank you.
Um, I'd love for you to help define for our audience, because we have a broad audience, for those who may not be so familiar with extended reality, how would you define extended reality and why do you think it's crucial for businesses to embrace it?
So the term extended reality has been adopted by the majority of the industry. There's still some people who call this something else, but really, it's a way to encompass any merge or blend of digital and physical together. So there are so many terms that XR or extended reality is really an umbrella term to encompass everything. So we don't have to say augmented reality, virtual reality, spatial computing, mixed reality. Like it's just too much. So that's really the simplified version of it. But to just go between the two main virtual reality, you're completely occluded to the physical world. You're typically wearing a headset. You're seeing digital content all around you. You're able to interact with that through either controllers or hand tracking or some other haptic device. And then on the augmented reality side, you're overlaying digital content, whether that be 2D or 3D content, onto the physical world. And that is typically done through a smartphone or tablet, but also now through wearable devices. And then to get things, just because it's very popular now with releases of new headsets, spatial computing and mixed reality are sometimes used interchangeably, but that's really where you're using what would traditionally be a VR headset, but you're seeing the world around you through that headset. And then these digital objects and 3D models are interacting with your physical environment through a headset. So, again, way too much word soup nowadays. So, we try to consolidate it to simplify and call it XR.
Awesome. Thank you so much for defining that. Um, so, diving a little bit deeper, what are some of the common misconceptions or challenges that businesses face when venturing into XR? And can you share a little bit more of a preview on how your book helps to address those challenges?
One of the biggest, I guess, limitations that companies or organizations have in their minds when they're getting into this is that it's only at a prototype phase right now. We work with people who are already scaling XR technology within their organizations to multiple sites across the organization, or even deploying public apps globally in multiple languages. So the mentality that this is only for prototyping right now and that it's not ready for scaling, I think is a common misconception among organizations that we work with, at least in those early conversations. A lot of people, this is getting better, but a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's gaming tech. I don't want to use it for training." Whereas a lot of learners, a lot of newer employees really gravitate towards leveraging a gaming platform for training. It's appealing to them. It helps with both knowledge retention, but also excitement around onboarding and even recruiting. So that's another misconception that kind of gets flipped on its head once these organizations open their mind and accept that. And then another limitation we see sometimes is organizations wanting to circumvent IT, which we do not recommend. But a lot of these companies don't really know how to categorize VR or XR. And so they need to put processes internally to be able to support that. And so we try to, work with them and educate them. That's actually what a lot of the book is about, is helping to demystify these misconceptions and open people's minds to understand that this is actually ready today. It's not going to be, Iron Man level or gosh, there are so many movies that have all these, interfaces that are highly sophisticated. It's not quite there yet, but it's still highly effective and possible to achieve something that will show them that return on investment now. So the book really is to help break it down so that every part of the process is approachable and achievable.
That's great. And after reading your book, I definitely can say that I did find that to be very accessible and approachable from someone who's
Thank you.
not so immersed in the field. And I had, thought of things that I was like, wow, there are really applications in every industry. And if
Mhm.
you kind of start thinking about, how might you use this technology, you can find a lot of opportunities for that. So for my next question, I'd love to ask you, the XR landscape is constantly evolving. What trends are disrupting the industry right now that you're most excited about?
I would probably go back on the mixed reality and spatial computing side of things. We have, I guess, had the beginnings of this over the years through devices like the Microsoft HoloLens or Magic Leap. But with headsets now allowing full color pass through. So that's where you're wearing a VR headset, but you're seeing through the cameras on the outside and it's in full color. So you're able to wear the headset and walk around. And I know we've all seen the goofy pictures of people doing it with the Apple Vision Pro, which I do not recommend that you walk down the street doing this. That is not what I'm saying. But because the pass through is so good that you could walk down the street, being able to now really blend the physical world around you with these 3D objects, whether it is for design reviews of maybe a new piece of machinery going in on a job site. You want to see it there, you want to walk around it, you want to be able to mark it up, you want to be able to send these design revisions back to your engineering team. Or if it's giving additional information and pop ups and overlays onto a physical piece of machinery. I think that is the next wave of content that we're going to see. Right now, it's been very much like phone and tablet based AR or fully occluded VR, and we're now getting a blend of this. Meta has a great experience where you're fighting aliens in your any room that you are in, and it is mapped so well to the environment that like you see a spaceship coming out of the ceiling and like sucking things up, sucking aliens up and different 3D models, and it looks like your ceiling has opened up. It is extremely cool. Cool is the best word I can use for it. So I think that's the next trend we'll see in content, and really the blending of the digital and the physical.
That's awesome. That's super cool. I would love to know. I mean, I think the alien example is fun. That sounds really fun. But I'm curious for some of the other businesses that you've worked with. You mentioned that you've worked with Delta Airlines and Mars Wrigley. Can you share some specific examples on how they've leveraged XR to their advantage and what other businesses might learn from their experiences?
Sure. Delta Airlines basically used VR for something that you cannot do in the physical world, which is change the weather. That is something we don't have control over, unfortunately, although some days I wish I did. But de-icing planes is something that is extremely important for both the safety of the customers as well as just the function of the aircraft. And it is something that has to happen for planes to fly in the winter months. So they get their training for that prior to the season, and they can practice, of course, with their trainers. And we actually got to do that with water. They let you de-ice a plane with water. They don't let anyone do it, but because we were replicating it in VR, one of my designers got to go up in the open bucket and spray a plane. So we really got to understand what the process was like, and we replicated that in VR. Now, of course, waiting on the weather is the biggest thing because that's something you can't do. So we simulate different contaminant types for ice, snow, and frost. We have a few different planes, a couple of different environments, and these simulations can be set by the trainer to put the trainee or the de-icer who needs recertification in for any scenario that they choose with all of these different variables. So you're now opening up the opportunity for the de-icers to practice as much as they need in a safe environment that is not using any materials as well. So if you think of de-icing a plane, the fluid to do so is not only costly, but something that you don't want to put out in the environment unless you need to for de-icing a plane. It's different when you're doing it with water, but you definitely can't de-ice a plane with water in the winter. So thinking of the material savings that they're having there, the environmental impact that they're having, the ability to run people through the simulation to be more prepared for the job is not only a benefit for the airline, but also a huge benefit for the employee. So they were able to find some great success with that and using VR to do something you couldn't do in the physical world. With Mars, we've been able to replicate some of their machinery on their manufacturing sites in VR. So we've got fully functional animated 3D models of their machines for a product line. And we teach them about all of the different parts and components in VR. The going out onto the floor, which I've been to as well, the gum factory smells amazing. So going out there, it's great, it's cool, but it is impossible to hear. And a lot of people across manufacturing have that difficulty. You're wearing ear protection. You can't hear the trainer talking. So by being able to bring that into the virtual world, we're able to actually facilitate a training session where the employee can hear the trainer. They can learn at their own speed. They can practice again as much as they need. They don't waste any material. There's no machine downtime. So really just a ton of benefits in doing this. And then with one 3D model of a product line, we've actually been able to use it for familiarization, but also for some troubleshooting and inspection simulations as well. So you're reusing that asset and creating a whole suite of VR tools, leveraging that one product line. So those are just a couple of real world examples of companies leveraging VR for, again, things that you can't necessarily do in the physical world.
Those, I think, are really awesome examples, and I think they're very clear use cases in terms of how it solves a problem. You talked about the cost savings. There's clear operational efficiencies, and also you don't have downtime on waiting to learn, and how do you train, and all of that. So I think there, I mean, it's so cool to see those applications. You mentioned in your book that it's really important to find those right use cases, and maybe there's not every idea is meant for extended reality, but I'd love for you to talk us through the process on how do you go through that process of vetting the use cases, finding the most salient things to really dive in and work on.
Yeah, so my designer Elijah really boils it down to three things. Is it visible? Is it valuable? And is it viable? And well, I should start with viability because if it's not viable in VR, there's no point in going further. Not everything is made for VR and or meant for VR or AR. And that is something that we try to stress with the people we work with. Yes, it's very cool technology, but if there's not going to be a benefit, if you're not going to be able to measure the success of implementing something like this, or if it's not solving a problem, we don't recommend doing it. So I think a lot of people get caught up in the hype and the coolness of the technology and don't think about why they're doing it, why they're using it. And so that really is the root of the use case development is why. Why are you doing this? And what value is it going to bring? That all starts with finding a problem. So a lot of companies already know what the biggest we say loss leader or biggest cost to their organization is. A common theme that we continue to see is safety related. So, of course, that's not only financial cost to downtime of any sort of operations, but also the safety risk and loss of an individual, an employee, which is the last thing a company wants. All of these organizations we work with are very caring and cautious about the safety of their employees. And so any little thing that they can do to increase that level of safety, they're going to do. So I think, there are a million different use cases. There are endless use cases that can be come up with that the companies can come up with. But the biggest thing I think is just finding out what the problem is and then determining if it's viable for extended reality. In thinking about what I was saying earlier, doing things that you can't necessarily do in the physical world. You do not just want to bring in a tablet app into VR. There's no point. You don't want to bring a video into VR. That's just a waste of the platform. Anything you could do on a 2D screen that's already effective doesn't necessarily need to be brought into VR. You want to leverage extended reality for the things you can't do. So it is a process. There's no way to really explain it, the whole thing in 5 minutes or less. But I think the biggest points are finding a problem that could be solved with VR, and then determining the value and the success that you want to see, so that you have something to measure against as you're going through the design process, just always driving back to that success metric and ensuring that you're going to have that as your goal.
I think it's really important when to know where your headed is to really define
Mhm.
like what does success mean for the project you're working on, the organization you're part of.
Yeah.
A lot of businesses measure this through ROI, return on investment. What as companies are thinking about implementing XR initiatives, how can they measure ROI, and what are some of the metrics that they should be looking for? Like, I know maybe like early stage, you might be in more of a thinking and prototype phase and design, so that sometimes that that takes time to really vet those use cases and all of that. But once they go into production and launch, what are some ways that businesses can look at the ROI?
It is going to vary drastically per organization, as I know you know. But some of the biggest ones I'm seeing are, again, reduction in material waste, so or downtime of machinery, anything like that. Reduction in travel. Travel's a big one, whether it's training or sales. So if you think of leveraging extended reality for product visualization, being able to see a product or a service in a virtual format, being able to see it work, potentially having it animated or see it in your space. You may not need to travel as much as a sales organization within your company. So leveraging that is a big one. Even leveraging multiplayer to join a sales meeting in VR with another client and showing them their product and talking about it. You just save thousands of dollars just not having to fly to them. There are other ways, these are ways that companies are not as open with sharing, but the reduction in any serious injuries or fatalities on a job site is huge. Again, that is a really difficult one to talk about. It is serious. You're talking about a human life in that case. And unfortunately, these things happen. You're working in unsafe conditions, or really as safe as they can be for whatever task you're doing. But if you think of some of these industrial jobs, these safety risks can result in injuries and fatalities. And that is costly in many different ways to the organization. So the main thing to mention with measuring success is you need to have the benchmarks before deployment to be able to measure the success after deployment. So in that initial phase, when you are defining the use case and coming up with how you want to measure success, ensure that these metrics are already being tracked so that you have something to compare it against once you have a deployment and you're starting to generate those metrics after deployment.
Definitely. I think setting the benchmarks and knowing what it was before and after is
Mhm.
clearest way to really measure that incrementality and know if what you're doing is the right decision. So I agree there. Um, what advice would you give to businesses who have limited budgets but still want to explore XR?
Yeah, there are different levels of extended reality out there. There are some off-the-shelf content platforms that are available for either companies with smaller budgets or people who are just getting started and maybe don't want to go fully custom just yet. There are a lot of educational platforms out there as well that have educational content. I know I've been very much focused on a business lens because that is my specialty, but there's a company, I believe, called Victory XR that has a whole suite of educational modules that schools and other organizations license to help people learn about different tasks. I think I did their frog dissection VR experience to kind of throw back to high school there. But yeah, off the shelf content is not as detailed necessarily, but it does give a great way for organizations to kind of get their feet wet before jumping totally in.
Very cool. That's awesome to see that there's some like more like off the shelf solutions that
Mhm.
businesses can get started with and dip their toes in and see. Um, I'd love to know, how do you balance the technical aspects of extended reality with the more creative aspects in projects?
That is tough. There are sometimes a butting of heads with that, but we really are limited by the technology right now, and not in a bad way. But a lot of the creative constraints are based on technical limitations. So everyone wants to use mobile VR now. No one wants to be tethered to a computer. So we're using headsets like the Pico suite of enterprise headsets, or Quest or HTC devices. And all of these are basically running on an Android phone, which is fine, but everything you create has to be highly optimized for that. So sometimes, we can't use the completely photorealistic graphics because we need an interactive experience that we actually manipulate. And there are concessions that need to be made. So while we want to open our minds creatively and think about the best of the best and what we want to design, sometimes we do have to scale back a little bit based on the comfort of the user experience and ensuring that everything is optimized so that no one gets sick. That is the absolute last thing that we want. So it kind of balances itself out. We're limited, so it makes us more firm in our creative decisions.
Yep, definitely. Um, So, for newcomers who are entering the field of extended reality, I know you wrote this book. I think this was, really is the blueprint, right? So, I'd love for you to share with us, what impact do you hope that your book will have on readers who are really interested in learning more and getting started with immersive technologies?
I hope they realize it's approachable and that anyone from any industry with any background can get into it. Again, like, I came from marketing in the power industry and I found my way in, and now that's all I do. So if you're passionate about it, there is an opportunity for you here. While, yes, I've been in it a decade, my company's been around a decade this year. There We've only scratched the surface. The industry is still so new and growing rapidly that there are opportunities. So it's still the Wild West. It's a really fun time to jump in there. And I am hopeful that people are inspired and they are interested in jumping in, because we need more people. We need more content creators. We need more developers. We need more producers. The industry is only going to grow if the talent gets into it. So I'm hopeful that people listening who are new realize that there is a space for them here.
Well, thank you, Annie. That is really inspiring. I know after reading your book, like I mentioned before, I saw so many different applications and ways that this could be used, and it is really exciting when you've tried out different technologies and and also seeing like where we're headed in the future. So I do believe your book will have that impact on its readers. And I wanted to thank you so much for being here today and answering my questions. Um, and I thank you everyone else for tuning in. And we'll see you at the next Talks at Google event.
Thank you, Jana. It was great to speak with you today.
It's great to speak with you as well. Thanks.